Hello, folks. Welcome to Rational Science. Great day for physics, terrible day for mathematical so called physics. And we're going to be doing what? Pendulums today. What is a pendulum? And before we do that, we're going to go into some subjects related to extinction, as we usually do. And so let's start with this headline that came out. Here it is. World races to contain new COVID threat, the Omicron variant. It says the article says that in announcing new travel restrictions, President Biden, told reporters, "I've decided that we're going to be cautious." So get ready for a new round of restrictions. And it makes me kind of wonder, I mean, this is the time of the year where people get regular flu, okay? And so, yeah, I expected people to get colds and so on. I usually, well, not usually, I haven't had one for maybe a couple years, but I regularly or periodically get get flus and colds and so on. And usually it's this time of the year. If it's not in October, November, and December, it's maybe at the end of the winter, around, what is it, April, thereabouts. And if I don't get it in those two times of the year, I usually don't get it at all. And so for them to say, look, we have the COVID just when the flu comes in, it's kind of suspicious, at least for me. And this is what this is my take on COVID. And I do clarify that I did get the shots, and I got the shots merely because I was going to travel to South America, and I'm glad I did because you don't imagine all the hassle you get because of this COVID thing. And they're just going to tighten the screws now. I mean, right now here in Germany, um, you can't even take the public transportation unless you come with your COVID shots, documented, your little passport, your visa to go to the streets. And as I understand it, also uh, all these food stores, especially, and malls, if you still remember what a mall was, they're going to be requiring these things as well. And so this is my take on it, okay? I'm saying that these are the for and against, the pros and cons. I'm saying that it seems like there is some kind of bug out there. And the reason I think that is that, I think the enemies of the United States, such as, you know, uh, Cuba or North Korea, they would not cooperate with the United States on something like this. They wouldn't go ahead and tell their public, oh yeah, we've got this COVID thing, so you got to get the shots and you got to stay indoors and all that kind of stuff. No, you would think that at least the enemy countries would not follow the rich people in the United States. So that gives me an idea that there is a bug out there. Okay. On the other hand, these are the things that I've got that make me wonder. Okay. One is all the profiting that's going on with this COVID, all the control, the fact that they make you wear a mask and now what, you need to carry a passport on the streets, or otherwise the Gestapo will stop you and say, hey, where's your COVID shot? And take you in or fine you or whatever. And then the fact that we have these new strains, specifically at the time that, that it's flu season. And the question is this just an ordinary flu, or is this, something that they've invented? I mean, especially the new strands, that makes you kind of wonder, is there something going on out there? And you might say, well, what could be going on? Okay. Well, I'm just going to, you know, shoot the bull around, okay? And I'm just going to propose. Let's assume the rich folk have already figured out that they can't solve the world's problems, economic problems. Okay, so maybe they're just looking to extend our lives as much as possible. Uh, and maybe this is one way of doing it. Getting people under control, telling them, scaring them with this COVID thing. Let's just assume. I'm making an assumption. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just making an assumption. Let's assume that this is a theory. That this could be going on. That if they know that it's all going down the drain, they might say, well, how can we extend it? Well, one way to extend it is to say, well, yeah, there's this bug out there. You got to cover your face. You got to stay at home. You can't travel, all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, they make some money, or some of them make some money. Others lose because the restaurants, hotels, they're losing money, airlines. Um, but it could happen, something like that. That would be one of the ways that I can imagine that they could create this story, this fib. But then again, I don't think North Korea, Cuba, Russia, China, they would all, shake hands with the U.S. government, okay, and Europe. So again, just a theory, okay? Not that I believe it, but something like that might be going on in the background. Okay, something I talked about the other day in the news this week. Mr. Assange. What would we do without Mr. Assange? What a slick guy. Says U.S. Stonewall's probe into security firm that allegedly spied on Assange for CIA's Spanish judge. Okay, so they put him in the news again. And yeah, this guy's in the news every day. Okay, and the question is whether he's real. And I'm saying he ain't. Not by a long stretch, okay? This guy can't be for real. And here, let me show you some proof, some evidence, okay? This is proof evidence that Assange is a U.S. government operation, okay? Here you see him with his wife, Stella, running around outside the embassy when? In 2017. Now, if you remember correctly, a couple years earlier, they had all the bobbies surrounding the Ecuadorian embassy. They wouldn't, they said they had the power to go in there and drag him out. And the OAS here in the Western world, they had a big powwow saying, how dare they? How can the British think that they can go into the embassy and drag him out? That's a violation of the diplomatic protocol, etc., etc. And here, a couple years later, this guy's running around the streets of London. Now, where were the bobbies when we needed them here? I mean, this is when the MI6 and the MI5 should have gone in there and arrested him. What's this guy doing on the streets? And then, this thing about killing him and murdering him that they're spreading out now. Look at the bottom right picture there where it says The Guardian. You had the bobbies, and this guy, Assange, was talking from the window, out to the public that was gathered there. I mean, if they really wanted to kill him, this was an easier shot than JFK. They could have shot him down right there. And, if he's such a criminal, I don't think that anybody would have, lost any sleep over it, right? So, no, this guy for sure is not for real. But, some people believe him and believe this other bozo, Ed Snowden, which the United States created. And yeah, they have to do these operations. Remember, the United States spends over $80 billion a year in intelligence overall. And people say, well, yeah, we have to defend ourselves against China and against Russia. And no, the number one enemy of the U.S. government is not either Russia or China, it's the American people, okay? It's the people of the United States. Those are the ones they have to have under control, because if you don't have those under control, forget about China and Russia, okay? You got a problem right there in front of you. So those are the people they have to lead by the nose. So one fellow says, how is the U.S. government responsible for Assange and Snowden having a public profile? Okay? Do the governments control the media? Are the people who work in the news media honest but dumb, or are they actual disinfo agents? Like all of them, or what are we talking about here? And what of those that own the media? Okay, and yeah, I'll just give you my 5 cents worth. The United States is the country that has the least freedom of press. Okay, it's the one that has the least freedom of press. It has to be, first of all, because it's the #1 empire. And so it has to put all the controls in place to make sure that, the right information reaches the public. And especially on things that matter. Okay, it has to be on things that matter. If one person out there, says, okay, we have this Hollywood couple, Joe Blow and Susie Q, and they're separating, they're getting a divorce. And so you're going to have all these different opinions about them. One guy say, well, it's his fault, and the other person's going to say, no, it's her fault. And they're going to have opinions, a million. Nobody cares about that. That's dumb blonde kind of stuff, small talk. So there you can have a million opinions. You can also have Democrats against Republicans. And they're going to, they have their newspapers, their outlets, and they're going to shoot, mud at each other. But it's when things count, things that are important, where you test freedom of the press. Those are the ones that are important. JFK's assassination, 9/11, and these two bozos, Assange and Snowden. That's where it counts. And then you find, eerily, right? You find unanimity. You find that all newspapers, all TV stations in the United States, all radio stations, all of them, 150% of them. JFK is, a lot of people doubt, and they have blogs and they even put videos out there, but the official version is what's spread throughout the main channels, right, out there. And what do they say? Well, they say that, oh, you're a conspiracist. We have all these conspiracists, all these nuts out there. And they believe that JFK was assassinated by the U.S. government. Can you believe that? These people are nuts, they're crazy. That's how they treat you, And 9/11, oh, we have all these conspiracists out there. And Assange and Snowden, 150% unanimity. Not one newspaper, not one TV station, not one radio station in the entire United States even suspects, even considers, even ponders or theorizes that maybe, just maybe, this could be a U.S. government operation. You would think that at least one newspaper, one TV station, one radio station would say, hey, just maybe, let's try a theory there, right? Not one of them. Everyone has gone in the same direction. And yeah, here you see why, part of the reason of why. Okay, here's this fellow, and his name is Rupert Murdoch, and he owns practically all the news in the United States. Billionaire businessman, media tycoon, and investor. And you can see there how the blogs portray him as, a guy who dominates the politicians, and he's the Murdoctopus. Yeah, because he controls a lot of stuff. He's the puppeteer, okay? Through his company, News Corp, he is the owner of hundreds of local, national, and international publishing outlets around the world. There you have UK, Australia, US, okay? Some of the things he owns. With a net worth of $22 billion as of 28th July 2021, Murdoch is the 31st richest person in the United States and the 71st richest in the world. Okay, so yeah, good old Rupert, he owns a lot, but I mean, who do you think he goes around with? Well, he goes around with his buddies, other people who own the media, and they all think the same way. And so, and the things that matter, like 9/11, JFK assassination, Assange and Snowden, they play ball. They play ball. They're not going to oppose the U.S. government, because now you're not talking about Republican against Democrat. Now you're talking about 250 years of democracy going down the drain if people even suspect that that could be the case. And so you have to drive it in. And the new generations, a lot of them don't do research, and they just buy the official version because it's 90% of the word that's out there. So you think a lot of them are going to say, oh yeah, 9/11 was done by George Bush. No, of course not. They're going to go out there and say, oh, there's this guy bin Laden who apparently burned the buildings, and that's all they know. And on top of that, you have YouTube wiping out videos. They wiped out 3 of my videos. You need to be over 150 years old to listen to the 9/11 anthem that I put out there. So they blocked it. So you got all this going on, and who's doing that? Well, it's all these rich people who say, "Hey, get rid of all the YouTube videos that talk against 9/11, and just put the ones that talk in favor." Let's just put. I mean, why would they do that unless they're trying to prepare the new generations just to repeat the party line? Okay, so yeah, the United States is number one in in least freedom of the press. Now, China and Russia, they don't have very much freedom of the press, but people are aware of it because they're so uh, they're so blunt in the way they do it. They're not subtle. So everybody knows the Chinese Communist Party or the Cuban Communist Party is just going to put a lot of propaganda, and it's so obvious, so people know it, even in the country. They're very much aware of that. But in the United States, people actually believe the news. They say, no, we have a democratic country, we have free press here. And that's why they believe it, because the United States is much more subtle in the way it does it. And in that sense, yeah, it is the least freedom of the press country in the world. Okay, here's another comment along these same lines. It might be in American interest to start a world war. Whoa. To unify its population and prevent a civil war. Okay, politicians have done that in the past where they create a diversion, okay, so that people stop thinking about one thing and instead concentrate on another. Except that I would say that a world war is probably much more dangerous than what he says there, a race war within the United States. So I don't know. And the question for you is, will there ever be a civil war in the United States? Is this ramping up? Are we having the right against the left, killing each other? Maybe on the streets. One group kills someone from the other side. Yeah, that might happen. Will that blow over into a full-scale civil war where military people who, command forces take sides and shoot against each other? I don't think so. But, again, people have different opinions about these things. Okay, another thought around the war issue. We have a lot of war stuff today. The war doesn't put people at work. Well, it's absolute nonsense, Bill, because I said that. It doesn't put people to work. I don't know where you got that, okay? First, because we are already at war. The world is at war, or rather several wars in different countries at the same time. Yeah, that's not a war, a world war. We were talking about World War III here, the big guys, and I mean the big guys confronting big guys, not using, these tiny countries where they meet and the forces that fight are the local ones and they just feed them weapons. That's different than, a head-on clash between the two monsters out there. That's very different, okay? So I just want to put it in the right context. This perennial state of war gives work to billions of individuals. Yeah, and again, he took that out of context because the context is that in World War II, like you see there, women especially came out of the houses, especially the young girls, and they started working at the factories. They had jobs, and a lot of them came out of the houses and started working. Men, they went out to Europe and got killed, or Asia and got killed. But what happened was all these people were working in the armaments business. What is armaments? That's known as manufacturing. Okay, they worked in industry. And I'm saying that if there is a war now, people are not going to be working by the gazillions in the manufacturing segment of the economy. That's what I'm saying. And so, yeah, they're going to continue working what they are now. In fact, I don't even think they're going to be working in what they're working now because we have all these killer satellites out there that the first thing they'll wipe out will be the satellites. And you won't have any internet. And if you don't have any internet, forget about guiding the missiles. That's the least of the problems. The big problem will be that they wiped out all the money on the planet. They wiped out all the money because all the money is on the internet. Oh, my bitcoins. Oh, they're gone. Yeah. Yeah, how many did you have? Yeah, internet is very frail. If the satellite goes down, that's it for the internet, guys. No communication, and suddenly you're as poor as or as rich as Bill Gates. Okay, so keep that in mind. The internet is everything right now, and all the jobs depend on the internet now as well. You wipe out the internet, you wiped out close to 80% of the jobs in the United States, in the world. Okay, lots of jobs depend on the internet now. So we don't want to mess with those satellites. Okay, please don't touch them. But now we've got the killer satellites. So yeah, we got what we needed, the antidote to the satellites, to the internet. So if you ever were upset about the internet, maybe the Russians will help you. Okay, here we have the fourth industrial revolution. What the hell is that? Planned, designed, and in progress. Okay, that's being stimulated, spread out by some rich people. And here you have a few of them. Okay, they're famous because they're behind this fourth industrial revolution. And you have this other fella who I've been tracking for many years now, Ray Kurzweil. And he says the singularity, a point where the development of technology becomes so fast that humanity will no longer be able to keep up with it. Okay, the singularity. Remember, that comes out of mathematics, right? Black hole has singularity at its center. What's a particle? It's a singularity. Everything's a singularity. What's an event? Singularity, a point in space-time, etc. Yeah. The singularity, in other words, is the moment AI, artificial intelligence, begins to evolve without us. Okay? So these people are all saying, oh, we're very close to the singularity. In fact, that's what Kurzweil has been saying for many years, saying we're very close to the singularity, to the point where the AIs take off and we can't control them anymore. Now they run the world, because now they can invent stuff and create stuff, and they're smarter than us at that point. And so now their intelligence grows exponentially, and they can think things exponentially while our tiny brains, they can't keep up. Well, these guys, tiny brains, I'm sorry. They can't keep up. So what is this fourth industrial revolution? Let's find out. I want to know what this revolution is all about, because I must have missed it or I'm missing it. Okay, one of the two. And here it is, the fourth industrial revolution. The first one was water and steam power to mechanize production. Okay, and you're talking about maybe the late 1700s, early 1800s, where they invented steam, right? And they started driving some of the engines with steams. You heard the steam locomotive, the steam ships, etc. Okay, and then second one was electric power to create mass production, and that started probably in the late 19th century, for sure, most of the 20th century. We started putting electricity behind things. Okay, refrigerators, washing machines, television. We didn't have any of that in the 19th century. That started all in the 20th century. And the third one, again, I must have missed this one because I only recognize the first revolution, the only revolution, which was that second one there, the electric power. Well, really both of them, first and second. Okay, but here it says electronics and information technology to automate production. That was the third one. Okay, and the fourth one, what is this fourth one all about? It says the digital revolution. The digital revolution, characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. Well, the first comment I want to say is that, revolution requires masses of people. That's known as a revolution. Until that happens, you don't have a revolution. You need masses of people. And so one of the issues there is whether these things are going to put masses of workers to work. Okay, that's the first one I'm saying. Yeah, you got to look at. But the question is, what if you don't put people to work in manufacturing, into industry, do you have a revolution? You know, these people are talking about minor changes, cosmetic changes in the world of industry. But it was industry all along, all the way from the 18th century all the way to the 21st century. It was all industry, manufacturing. And that's become smaller and smaller and smaller in the last 200 years. Today, in the advanced nations, it's anywhere between 15 and 20% of their GDP and of their workforce. Most people work, about 80% or near 80%, work in services, primarily today, and moving closer to internet services. You know, ads, entertainment. We're in the BS world now. We're producing nothing. And manufacturing is becoming a smaller percent of GDP and a smaller percentage of the workforce. And again, I don't think even a war is going to put people to work in manufacturing, because they do have, first of all, they have all the equipment they need out there. For the most part, they're all prepared for the next war. But even if they need to ramp up, it's going to be done by what? The AIs, the robots. You know, we have machines producing, you know, the new bombs and so on, a lot of the parts and so on. So it's not going to put people to work. And so when I talk about a war not putting people to work, I'm talking about a war putting people to work in manufacturing. That's what I'm talking about, because that's what solved the problem for what happened in the 30s, which was the Depression era. You know, people couldn't find work and things were pretty lousy. The war helped everybody. It helped Germany as well as the United States. It helped Russia for sure. Helped England and France, except that they were immediately conquered by Hitler. But, you know, after the destruction occurred, after 5 years, 6 years there, you know, manufacturing ramped up. It was the manufacturing age at its highest. It was the golden age of manufacturing. And yeah, after all that happened, you know, we moved into services. And now what is manufacturing today? We have all the goods we need, tangible goods. I mean, you probably have a house or rent one. You have a roof over your head. You probably have a fridge. You probably have an oven, what is it, kitchen, a washing machine, a dryer. Everybody's got one of those pretty much, at least in the advanced nations. And he who doesn't have it in the poor nation wants to have it. You know, and that's not going to drive, because these are the poor people, again, it's not going to drive a demand to such a point where you have manufacturing grow again. No, manufacturing's over. We're done with manufacturing. And with the mode, the family type, which is related to the manufacturing, which is the nuclear family, you know, mom, pop, and kids. That's over as well. We're now into services. Services is the single person, the bachelor, or the homosexual, people who don't produce children, essentially. You know, in any way you look at it, you're not going to be producing children. Everybody's moved to the city where it's very crowded. You can't have children in the cities. And so we're not going to go back to the days of old where, you know, women had, 10 children. Half of them died, and so nobody cared because you had 5 others. That's over now. Right now, if anything, you get one, maybe. If the woman is brave enough to go through the pains, they don't even want to go through that. So not only do we have manufacturing that phased into services, but with services comes a new type of family, which is the single person. Nobody knows everybody. Everybody's on his own. Or like the Three Stooges once said, they said, all for one and one for all. And Curly says, I'm for myself. Everybody's for himself now, okay? That's what it is, more or less. That's the direction which we're going. Okay, here's another comment. Well, it says, your trade pyramid, I talked about that a little while ago, model is missing the most important, the trade of the money. Where did you put the money trade? Money trade? What the hell is the money trade? There is no such thing as money trade. All we do is trade what you see there. You change services for gadgets, gadgets for food, and food for services, and so on. That's it. That's all you trade. What money is one of those three in stored value. Okay, that's what money is. Money is just a medium of exchange for one of those things for the other, one of those groups for the other. That's all it is. So when you sell something, well, someone buys it and he gives you money. But where did he get the money? Well, he had to sell something and he sold one of those three to get that money. So money is just stored value. But all you have is one of those three. That's what we're trading. So there is no such thing as trade in money. Okay? Again, don't get confused with this thing where today people are investing in bitcoins and so on. That's, again, where did they get the money? What does the money represent? Okay? And you say, well, it represents value. Well, where did you get that value? Well, you got it either for providing a service, providing a good, or maybe food, which is another tangible good, right? So it's trade is only one of those three. There's no other thing except those three. Okay, here's another fellow says, talks two guys, in fact. One guy says the Cubans were responsible for JFK's death, and rightly on. He was trying to kill Castro after all. Another fellow says JFK was shot at from multiple shooters at different angles. This was and is standard military practice. Okay, well, I'm, as you know, I think that I'm a conspiracist, one of those nuts. Kennedy was murdered by the U.S. government, specifically, as I mentioned the other day. I think the leaders there were many people involved, but primarily inside the U.S. government was Lyndon Johnson, J. Edgar Hoover, and Allen Dulles. Head of the FBI, head of the CIA, and head of the U.S. government. Before he was vice president until Kennedy was dead. So those three were the masterminds, the ones who pushed it the most, and they had a lot of conservative groups in Washington D.C. that did not like the Kennedys at all. They were too liberal. The world wasn't ready for the Kennedys, especially the United States. They weren't ready for them. And so, all these conservatives, especially, the oilmen in Texas and so on, the mafias who were trying to recover their properties in Cuba, there were a lot of people who hated the Kennedys. After all, he was the guy who won with the least margin over Nixon. Okay, so, they didn't really want him. In fact, as I understand it, Sam Giancana, who was the head of the Chicago outfit, either him or his boss, he was like number two, and the other fellow was retiring or whatever, but gave him counsel, more or less like what happens in Cuba today, where you have Castro in the background, really governing or giving suggestions. But Sam Giancana apparently mustered the votes in Illinois to go in favor of Kennedy, thinking that maybe by appeasing him, Bobby Kennedy, who was prosecuting all these mafiosi, would leave him alone. And that didn't happen, and so they got rid of Kennedy. And a year later, that cost Bobby his job, and in '68, it cost him his life. So, that's how democracy works. Okay, yeah. Okay, and here you have another guy that says, subject of homosexuality, which we touch upon as well, because we want to know whether, this has something to do with the extinction, especially my argument, which is that it's in the cards that there will be more and more homosexuals from now on. They're not coming because of something they ate. They're not coming because of climate change. They're coming out of the wombs like that because we've been inbreeding for so long, and now we're in the big cities, thousands of people inbreeding in there, and whatever comes out is not going to be very sophisticated in their genes. We're all going to be more and more clones, and we're going to be seeing all kinds of genetic problems. And I think saying that this is a genetic type of problem. Okay, so what does homosexuality even mean? Is it being a limp-wristed femboy? Trying to understand how it differs from a fetish. If an old-fashioned gruff male is aroused by other males, is that a curable learned fetish, whereas a girly personality is an incurable innate orientation. And so, well, this is my answer to this fellow. Okay, homosexuality, let's define it: same-sex attraction. Doesn't mean you have to go to bed with a guy, but you're attracted by men. In the case of men, right? Women are attracted by women. Okay, so that's my definition of that: same-sex attraction. Now, the way I look at it, there's only two sexes, and that's double X and XY. That's it. You know, there's no intermediate. Even if there's an exception out there somewhere, you know, I'm not sure what that thing is. As I understand it, the Komodo dragon has like a Z in there. Okay. But the third sex in humans, when we talk about third sex, you know, LGBT, XYZ, all these other things and pronouns, well, that's only politics. Okay, that's only because we're in the age of diversity and inclusion. Right now, you know, every university on the planet now, especially in the United States, has created this diversity and inclusion department, which is incredible. You know, they have this everywhere. It's like, it's a problem, and they want to make sure when you go to college, you're safe. Okay, this is a way of guaranteeing it. Okay, anyways, the way I look at it, sex is only for reproduction. Okay, only for reproduction. Mother Nature did not make sex for enjoyment, for leisure. If you enjoy it, if you have fun with it, more power to you. That's great. And I'm sure Mother Nature kind of insinuated that in order to get you to do it. But the origin of sex there is for the purposes first only for reproduction. That was the only purpose. And the origin of sex is LECA. What the hell is LECA? Well, here we have a little rundown on this. Transition from prokaryote to proto-eukaryote to the last eukaryote common ancestor. Okay, last eukaryote common ancestor, LECA. There you have it. That's what it is. Entailed conservation, modification, and reconfiguration of pre-existing genetic circuits via mutation, horizontal gene transfer, endosymbiosis, and selection, as detailed in previous articles of this collection. Okay, during the course of this evolutionary trajectory, the LECA became sexual, reassorting and recombining chromosomes in a process that entails regulated fusions of blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the LECA became sexual originally. This is the theory, okay? It doesn't mean you have to believe it. I'm just saying this is probably the main theory out there. The LECA was sexual is no longer a matter of speculation or debate, as evidence of sex and of genes exclusively involved in meiosis has been found in all major eukaryotic radiations. And they mentioned several papers there that stand behind that statement. Okay, so they all, apparently all these people agree, all these researchers agree that the LECA was already sexual, and eukaryote is the source of plants and animals. And so if you wonder why plants and animals have sex, well, you have to trace it here. And so I'm going to ask you, do you think this ancient eukaryote was that thinking pleasure? How about plants? Do plants talk about pleasure? Do they have pleasure when they have sex, when they throw their pollen at each other? Hopefully to the right sex. Throw it to the guy who throws the pollen to the other guy. I don't know. Okay, so and by the way, this is a eukaryote. Okay, the organisms whose cells contain nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. There is a wide range of eukaryotic organisms, including all animals, plants, fungi, protists, etc. Okay, so yeah, the eukaryotes gave origin to plants and animals. Okay, and they're saying that our predecessor, the predecessor to eukaryotes, LECAs, they already had sex. And this is what they apparently discovered after doing research. Apparently there is quite a bit of unanimity to that. So I don't know, it's just a theory, but it sounds like a pretty good theory to me because you have to wonder why it's plants and animals that have sex. Not all of them, I guess, I don't know. But plants and animals essentially reproduce through sex. And so sex was made for, not for pleasure, because I can't believe that plants have pleasure with sex. You might say, well, how do you know that? Well, I don't know that. I mean, I'm not a plant. I can't tell you if they have sexual pleasure at throwing the pollen, okay? I just have to think that a plant does not have all these senses that humans have for sure. And I don't even think they have the senses of, a starfish. So I don't know. What can I tell you? Sex was not made for pleasure. Okay, if you get pleasure, that's like a bonus. It's an unwanted consequence. But sex was made for reproduction, and you cannot have reproduction between two males. You cannot have reproduction between two females. End of story. And of course, homosexuals will, especially the lobby, homosexual lobby out there, they're going to oppose that because you're destroying their theory that sex is for pleasure, and all they're doing is exercising their right to pleasure. Well, I have a little bit of problem with that because I'm saying it's not for pleasure, and yeah, that tends to destroy their theory. Okay, here's a couple questions for you to ponder until next time here. Okay, and it's extinction questions that I've got for you. Okay, anyone who wants to tackle them. Will man live another 1,000 years? Okay, do you think humans will be around for next 1,000 years? How about 1,000,000 years? Okay, and again, the one that I want to focus on is the fact that for 200,000 years, we've probably been on the planet as human beings, meaning that if we go back in time, the last person we could still have viable sex with within our species would be maybe anywhere from 200 to 300,000 years ago. I call that the origin of our species, somewhere around there, okay? And so if for most of that time, maybe 90-95% of that time, we were hunter-gatherers, okay, primarily hunters, and we were 10,000 years, maybe about 9% or so, who knows. We were farmers, agriculturalists, 0.1% of that. We were industrialists, manufacturers, last 300 years maybe. And now for the last, 50, 60 years, we've been service providers. And now we're not going back to manufacturing. We're not going back to agriculture. We're not going back to hunting. So what, for the next 1,000 years, for the next 1,000,000 years, we're going to be doing the same boring things over and over again, just doing services? Or maybe the robots take over, which is, the next issue there. Will we live the next 100 years in like the service economy or leisure unemployment, meaning the robots do everything and we just have a great time, just watch TV, couch potatoes, maybe do gym, I don't know. Is that what we can expect for the next 100, 200, 300 years? Either unemployment, meaning in a good way, unemployment in a good way, that we don't have to work because we have the robots doing everything for us, and we have only this service economy. And then the last one, will we ever have a world government? I mean, here we have these three empires, the Chinese, the Russian, which might merge. I don't think each one trusts each other. That's my take on that. But right now they have a common enemy, which is the United States, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay, and so we have these three empires. Will there ever be a world government from those three empires? Will there come a time when all the politicians shake hands and they say, okay, let's all kiss and make up, and there are no more countries, no more religions. What was it, John Lennon? No religion too. We all become one. We're just humans for the first time in our history. No more divisions. Will that ever happen? Okay. Anyways, food for thought. I hope you tackle it. Okay, let's get on with it. We have now this issue about the is it the pendulum? Okay. What is a pendulum? And did it make any difference? I mean, was its discovery important? And I'm saying it was a very important discovery, okay, or development that they started working on the pendulum, okay. But before we get to that, I gotta go with the what we left off the other days, last couple times, which is this energy deal, because a lot of the folks out there, apparently they think they still haven't learned a lesson what energy is, and they just keep giving me the party line. They just put things that they copy and paste. That's all they know how to do. This is what they learned by rote in high school, maybe college, and they say the same things over and over again. They go out there and just copy and paste. They say, this is what energy is. And they don't attack the question. They don't address the issues that are being placed before them. So they're skirting the issue of energy. And I can see why, because they cannot answer the questions that I'm asking them. They're not addressing my comments, okay? And so this is, again, for those people who have a little more intelligence than some of these fellows, okay, for you to ponder, okay? Here it is. Fellow says, energy definition is what? Capacity. Okay, capacity, that's what energy is. Capacity to do work. The definition of capacity, right, to do work is what? Conceptual. Yeah, capacity is a concept. There is no physical standalone object called capacity. Okay, and as far as we know, only objects can move. Concepts cannot move. What does he say next? It says, each form of energy is explained as an entity that can be transferred, moved. So he's going to move the capacity around. Then he continues, says, a car battery has capacity. Okay, so it has capacity. Great. What does it have? It has a concept. This is different than saying, I have a coin in my pocket. That would be having a thing in my pocket. That would be a thing, right? But if I say I have a headache, that's not a thing that I possess. That's a development. That's a verb that's going on in my brain. Okay, so having a headache is not the same thing as having a coin in your pocket or having money on your hands, dollar bills on your hand, okay, or a coin in your hand. Are we starting the car with a concept? Well, no, we're starting the car with gas. Gas is not a concept. Okay, gas is a thing, is an object, a thing. Charged, the battery will have more, he said, mass than when dead. Well, he's probably wrong. He probably meant weight, because mass, I don't think he counted all the atoms in the battery. Okay, what he did was weigh it. Okay, he put it on how did he determine that the battery had a difference between before and after? Well, he weighed it. Okay, so he put it on some kind of device that measures its weight, not its mass. Mass is counting. Okay, you got to count atoms to get to mass. It's the quantity of matter. Are we measuring what is existing only in thought as an idea, but not having a physical or concrete existence? Abstract concept? There are only concepts or objects. Okay, he got one right. The power of elimination isn't complicated between the two choices. Again, very true. Saying energy is a concept is completely ridiculous. But he's saying that it's capacity, and then he says that capacity is a concept, and now he's saying that to say that a concept is, that energy is a concept is ridiculous. So he's going around in circles, and I'll tell you why. Okay, and it's that he doesn't define the terms. He's got to define what an object is and what a concept is. He's got to tell us what the difference between those two words is before he can go around in circles like he has here. Okay, in physics, if you define a word, that term is a concept. Okay, if you define, it's a concept. If you can point to it, then it's an object. And the question is, can you point to capacity? Okay, this should be a straightforward issue. Any rational human being should be able to deal with this. And if you can't, well, you're not a rational individual. You have a problem, a mental problem. You don't have to talk about physics. You need to see a shrink. Okay, this is how simple it is, straightforward. Okay, another fella says again, they're stuck on this energy thing because he, unlike this other one, he says you can point to capacity. Okay, but he's got a different idea of what energy is. He says it's not, he doesn't talk about capacity, okay? He talks about a delta. Okay, we'll see what this delta thing is, okay? Here is the process for seeing the delta. Okay, I want to see it. These are the instructions, I guess, he put in there. He says, you take your film and splice out your start frame. Okay, I did that, took frame, even though that's not the start of my film, of my complete film, but that's where I'm going to start my film. No problem, I can have a film strip. That's going to be my first film, my first frame of the film, 505, okay? Then overlay it on the end frame, finally shine a light through it, and you're now looking at the delta, okay? I called it the 506, doesn't matter. Okay, so I take these two, I put one frame, the 505 or the 506, which is what you see there, and he calls that the delta. And he says now he can point to the delta, or to the frame, or to whatever. Question is, will anyone on earth say, oh yeah, I know what that is, that's energy. One frame on top of the other, and that's energy. Or a delta, letter D, Greek letter D, I guess, right? Is that what energy is? Would every person on earth recognize and say, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. He's talking about energy. No, I don't think they would. No, what you need to do is present a standalone object, a mock-up of it, make it visible, put it on in the middle of the conference room. That's how we do it in science, okay? And if you can't do that, well, you don't have an object. Okay? So you don't give instructions on how to visualize energy. You make a drawing or take a snapshot or take some silly putty and mold it, and you say this is energy. This is what it looks like. That's how it works. Okay, that's an object in science. In religion, you go through all this stuff. In religion, irrationality, then you say, well, let me explain to you what energy is. No, if you can define energy, it's a concept. We don't define tables. We don't define chairs. We don't define dogs or trees. We point to them and say dog, tree, chair. That's how you present an object in physics. Not in ordinary speech, in physics. Okay? So what you have to do is bring energy, put it in front of us, a little drawing, picture, snapshot, statue, point to it and say energy. That's all we want to see and hear. Okay? Then you have pointed to energy. Right now you're going through this rigmarole. Let me point to the delta. And what is the delta? Well, you put one frame on top of the other, and no, that's not science. That's religion. You're an irrational individual. Okay. The way first, again, you got to know what an object is for the purposes of science. An object is that which has shape, and yes, if it has shape, there should be no reason for you to make a drawing or a picture or a mock-up of it of some kind, and to point to it. And name it. Say, tree. And then we know what a tree is. You want to explain to or identify an object for an ET, a Klingon who comes to visit us, and you say tree, and you say, oh, well, what is a tree? And you say, that's a tree. And you point and you say tree. And now he knows what a tree is because he sees it there. He says, okay, the word tree is associated with that thing he pointed to. That's how simple it is. And now you say energy. And you say, oh, what is energy? Let me explain it to you. First, let me define it. It's capacity or the delta or who knows what. And then he says, and see, this is the way you visualize it. You put one frame on top of the other, and then you shine a light through it. And the guy said, oh, okay, let me have a beer now. I need a beer. Okay, Paul says, mass and weight are two distinctly different measures. Yeah, they are, but weight is a measure. Mass is not a measure. Okay, mass you count. Weight you measure. Okay, so weight and Measuring and counting are not the same things. Okay, you count 10 apples, and you say those are apples. Okay, how many apples? 10. 10 apples. That's mass. That's the notion of mass. But if you weigh the apples, you say, okay, they weigh, I don't know, 10 pounds or whatever. They're big enough. So weighing is not the same thing as counting. Okay, so mass is like counting apples. Weighing is like putting them on a scale of some kind and getting a number usually in terms of pounds, kilograms, whatever. We can buy in mass measures of kilogram, gram. Well, no, we call it weight. That's how we use it every day. Okay, in fact, even the mathematicians use it. We can't buy in weight measures of newtons or joules. Yeah, nobody uses newtons or joules. I don't even think mathematicians deal too much with newtons and joules, again, because they don't really deal with units of weight. They talk about mass. They talk about kilograms and pounds in terms of mass, and the way they determine that is through weighing. So they're using the word mass to refer to weight. That's what's happening. And yeah, the units are kilograms and grams and so on. Okay, so we don't use joules or newtons. In fact, when talking about energy, we used to use KeVs, kilo electron volts. So we don't use some of these units that are very specific to certain industries and certain fields of study. Okay, those are very particular. People don't even know what a newton is out there. They wouldn't even be able to define it. They don't have any idea. The way it works is everybody uses weight, calls it kilograms, and the mathematicians want to say that, well, that's really mass. But it turns out that the way they determine that mass in kilograms is by weighing, because kilogram is a weighing type of unit. It's not a counting unit. Okay? Counting is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 whatevers. 5 units. Okay? How's that? So 5 units would be a notion of mass. But if you say kilogram, weighing, you're talking about weight, not mass. But the mathematicians called it weight. That's where the problem is. We can't subdivide grams into newtons. Yeah, they aren't the same kind of measure. Okay, you are using the word weight as its common definition. The physics definition is a different definition. It's interesting, they say, you got the wrong definition, but it would be nice if they put the right definition, right? And they never do that. They just say, you got it wrong. Okay, so let's put it up there so that everybody knows if I got it right or wrong. This is the definition we use, okay? Here it is, weight, mass multiplied by the acceleration due to gravity, okay? Weight, another one, the force acting on the object due to gravity, okay? Apparently weight has something to do with gravity. And what is mass? Well, here's a paper dating all the way to 1915. Mass as quantity of matter. And you see another entry somewhere in the internet. I didn't put all these references, but mass is a way of measuring the amount of matter. So what is weight? Well, any body is acted upon by the acceleration due to gravity to get the value of the weight of the body. Mass, on the other hand, the amount of matter present in that particular body. Okay? And yeah, that's the notion we have. But see, we don't count atoms, so we don't know what the amount of matter is except by weighing. That's where the problem comes in. And here you see it. Okay, this is what we have. You put the balance on the earth. Well, then, yeah, what you do is you're looking at weight, mass multiplied by the acceleration of gravity. Okay, but that's how we determine. The way we determine all these things is by weighing. Okay, we don't determine mass by counting atoms. That's the bottom line. Okay. Okay, so, and what's missing there again are the ropes, but that's a secondary issue. First, we need to understand why mass and weight are synonyms in mathematics. They are synonyms. They are synonyms because when you're talking about something falling to earth, we call that weight, and the mathematicians call it mass because they say, well, it's a measure of the quantity of matter. But see, quantity of matter is not a measure. Quantity of matter is counting atoms or whatever, units. Whatever unit you want, no problem. You choose the unit, no problem. But you better count if you want to talk about quantity of matter. Quantity of matter is not measure of matter. Measure of matter is weight. Okay? We measure weight, we count atoms or units for mass. So if you're going to use the word mass to refer to whatever gravity does to a body, then you're talking about weight. And what these people are saying is we're going to call that mass. And so you have people like Einstein who goes in there and says, you know, if an object accelerates near the speed of light, it gains mass. So what? It gained quantity of matter because it sped. Did it gain more atoms? It became bigger and bigger and bigger because it gained more atoms. And they say, no, it's because of the force with which it presses against the scale. That's the notion, right? It's a calculation, but that's the notion. Notion is pressing harder and harder, so now it gained mass, meaning it gained weight, because now you're having this thing press against a scale. That's a measure of weight, not of mass. Mass is quantity of matter. That means that if the object gained mass, it became bigger. And if it just presses harder against something, it's the same ball but pressing harder, we call that weight. But the mathematicians called it mass, and that confuses everybody. That's where the problem starts and ends. Okay, and here you have Mr. Einstein. He came up with a principle of equivalence. He didn't understand why. He just said it seems like these two equations, mass equals force divided by acceleration, which was Newton's second law. I talked about that in the past. It wasn't probably not even his, but and Newton's gravitational law, again, probably not his. But he said if you have these two situations, they're equal. Okay, a man falling from with his elevator and rising with the elevator at given speed, given acceleration. Well, they feel the same thing. And so he didn't understand why, but he said, I'll call that the principle of equivalence. And what he was saying essentially is that mass is equal to weight, because what is mass? Well, mass, if you use the mathematical formula, okay, not what it is in physics, but if you're going to use the mathematical formula, force divided by acceleration, okay, what do you have? Well, if you set that equal to Newton's gravitational law, well, now you have the principle of equivalence, okay? But what Einstein missed is that he never figured out the difference between mass and weight, just like all these people, because he was talking about weight, not about mass. He was talking about accelerating something and pressing against the scale. He was talking about what you feel if you fell with your elevator or rose with your elevator. Okay, he said the feeling is the same. Yeah, feeling we don't care because there are no observers in science. But the issue here was that he was equating these two equations, right? He was saying that the first equation is equal to the second equation. They do this all the time. And he didn't realize that what he was essentially saying is mass and weight are the same thing. Okay? That's what it came down to. But the mathematicians don't pick up on this in great measure because they use the word mass to refer to weight. That's the whole problem. They're talking about weight and they call it mass. Okay, let's move on to the pendulum. And this has a lot to do with what we just talked about, because pendulum is a gravitational device. And it takes this potential energy, whatever that is, and turns it into kinetic energy, whatever that is. Okay, we don't know what energy is, but one is transformed into the other. That's essentially what happens with a pendulum. Okay, and so it all starts around the 17th century, so-called scientific revolution. I call it the unscientific revolution. Okay, so let's start with that. And here it is, an unscientific revolution. The first casualty was Aristotle. That's the unscientific revolution essentially killed Aristotle. Okay, so rest in peace, And he died, and then what happened was they started doing experiments. They said, well, we can't do it the Aristotelian way of saying, oh, let me do a thought experiment. which was later on resuscitated by Mr. Einstein, right? He said they used to do these thought experiments, and they got a lot of those wrong, and that's why all these people criticized Aristotle. Says you should have done experiments, real experiments, on these things, on the simple things, right? Like throwing two stones and one big, one small, and finding out if they hit the floor at the same time, that sort of thing. Okay, so they started doing experiments. Okay, actually, it started really in the 16th century. So to say that it was the 17th century revolution, scientific revolution, I would say that started already in the 16th century, because you had, and I mentioned some names the other day. Who was it? Moletti, Stevin, Gilbert, just a few names there, but there were a lot more people. These weren't the only three inhabitants in those days. There were a lot of people out there doing experiments, especially with things that Aristotle should have done, like throwing two stones. A lot of people did that experiment, and it got around. Again, I talked about that in the past, but 16th century, you had like Gilbert. He played with magnets and so on. So a lot of people were doing experiments already. Okay, but 17th century really is where it took off, and where you have all these mathematicians come into play, and they started analyzing these things and mathematizing them, quantifying them. That's where the change in the 17th century came in. Okay, so you have a rapid evolution of math. Okay, emphasis on observing controlled experiment. No longer was it a casually observing something. Now you deliberately created an experiment, and you say, okay, and you started controlling all the factors that could influence your experiment. And so experimentation improved significantly in the 17th century. In that sense, you can say it's an experimental revolution, not so much a scientific revolution, because experiments have nothing to do with science. Let me repeat that, because people say, well, you misspoke. No. Experiments have nothing to do with science. Mathematics has nothing to do with science. Science is about explaining. An experiment is not an explanation. Math is a description. Okay, so let's get it right. Science is explaining something, a mechanism, especially in relation to physics. Physics is about explaining mechanisms. That's what physics is about. That's what the mathematicians who don't explain anything rationally, they dismiss that as philosophy. Okay, they say physics is math and experiment. That's essentially what came out of people like Galileo, especially. Okay, and so they established quantitative relationships in experiments. And again, it was an issue of fight between descriptions and explanations. What is an explanation? Physical interpretation, mechanism. That's what physics is about. And that's why they stopped. That's why I don't call it a scientific revolution. If anything, we got sidetracked. We went on a tangent and started doing math and experiments, and forgetting completely about explanations, okay, about mechanisms. And here's Galileo's take on that. It just puts it in the right context, okay? Philosophy, natural philosophy, right? He was referring to physics, is written in the great book which ever is before our eyes. I mean the universe. But we cannot understand it if we do not first learn the language and grasp the symbols in which it is written. The book is written in what? Mathematical language. And the symbols are triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, without whose help it is impossible to comprehend a single word of it, without which one wanders in vain through a dark labyrinth. And these are all statements of his. Mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe. And believe me, if I were again beginning my studies, I should follow the advice of Plato and start with mathematics. I think that in the discussion of natural problems, we ought to begin not with the scriptures. Now you see why they put them in prison, right? But with experiments and demonstrations. So you can see what happened. Here we had this man, and he was one of the first to propose that math and experiments is what it's all about. And you're going to see that with a pendulum, especially. We do lots of experiments, and they still cannot explain the mechanism of a pendulum. I mean, what is a pendulum? There's this here. That's a pendulum, my magic one. I mean, how difficult can it be? You know, here, just a little stick moving back and forth, maybe with a plumb bob at the end. Yeah, we know everything about it. I mean, as far as the description, how fast it goes, this and this and that. We know everything about the pendulum except why, what causes it to move. And this comes all the way from Galileo. Galileo saying it's all math and experiments. That's science. That's physics. And he forgot about the explanations, about the causes, the mechanisms. What causes all these things to move out there? How does Mother Nature do all these magic tricks? That's what we forgot, okay? That's what we sidestep. And what they were looking at with the pendulum was this thing about the inside track. You have the Earth going around the sun, and you have, Mars going around the sun. And so they figured out, well, if you're on the inside track, you got a shorter orbit, well, you're going to go faster than a guy who's got to go a long time around. So Galileo, they sensed this intuitively. You didn't need to be a genius to know this. But of course, a lot of people were so ignorant in those days that these guys were geniuses in comparison to them. So you have people like Galileo, they stood out because they said, oh, I think the Earth goes faster than Mars. Well, no kidding. Yeah, because one's on the inside track, the other one's on the outside track. And so this is how they came out with this experiment with the pendulum, because it gave them an insight into this. This is what they were trying to get to. They were trying to look at how the planets moved. Remember, Galileo had one of the first to use a telescope in a way that he could observe things that he could later describe to the masses out there. He was the one-eyed in the land of the blind. And so he looked at the Galilean moons of Jupiter, the 4 moons, right? And he discovered things. Discovered like Columbus discovered America. Did Columbus explain America? Did he invent America? No, he just bumped into it and called, I discovered America. And even that's be a challenge. But Galileo's similar. He just looked and said, oh, I found 4 moons of Jupiter. He couldn't explain anything. And then he found a pendulum. He started working with those. And he says, oh, here's the pendulum. I can describe it for you. I have all the relations. Yeah, but you don't know why it moves like that. What causes it to move like that? That's where he failed. That's why it wasn't science, because that's what physics is about. Explaining the causes, why it behaves that way. Okay, what's causing it to behave that way? Okay, so Galileo began playing around with pendulums as early as 1602. He was still quite young in those days. He was about to enter I think he had already entered as a professor at the University of Padua. And so he started running this experiment with pendulums, and he said, look, it's so strange because, if you look at the amplitude of 2 pendulums going side by side, and one has a short amplitude, the other one has a long amplitude, they still move at the same time. So they keep time in the same way. As long as the weight and the string length is the same, if you let go of them, one has a greater angle, it'll move faster than the other one, but they'll both be synchronized. And so he didn't answer why. He just said, it is so. So it's different to say it is so and to tell you why, how come. Okay, so let's distinguish those 2 things. Okay, he went in there and he said, well, what if I replace these two angles, and I just make them the same angle, but I change the weight. And so now he put more weight on one side and less weight on the other. In this case, we're illustrating that with 2 balls versus 1 ball, okay? And you can see even though the angle is the same, the rate is almost exactly alike. In fact, it should be exactly alike if you knew the exact weights of all these things, right? And they had the same distance and so on. Okay, so he said, okay, it's strange. That sounds counterintuitive, that you would think that the heavier weights would move slower, right? And that wasn't the case. They moved exactly at the same rate. Okay, so what was next? Well, he said, what if we changed the string length? And so now they changed the string length, And now they did notice something very strange. Now that did change for the first time, the rate at which they oscillated. And so they said, okay, the weight doesn't change it, and the angle doesn't change it, the amplitude doesn't change it, but apparently the string length does. Okay? Okay, so he had a description. He looked at that. That's just intuition. That's what he sees in front of it. Observer stuff, gawking, and you just describe what you see and you get a Nobel Prize. I get the Nobel Prize in pendulums. Why? Because I was the one who discovered that the amplitude and the weight doesn't change anything. What changes the rate is the length of the string. Okay, so he gets 100 points for that. And so he should get a Nobel for that, for discovering something about the pendulum, a description about the pendulum. Is that what science is about? Is that what physics is about? Bumping into the wall and say, "Hi, I discovered the wall." But yeah, you still have the paint on your nose. I'm the one who discovered the wall. I get a Nobel Prize for the wall because I'm the discoverer. And I mathematized it. I can tell you at what speed I hit the wall, how big it was. You can describe it any way you want. You get a Nobel for this, for describing. Okay, but we went on to this. He went on to this. Galileo used his knowledge, his extensive knowledge of pendulums, to create the pendulum clock. He didn't create it. He designed it, gave it to his son, who died a few years later, died prematurely, more or less. And his son was constructing this device when he died before he was able to finish it. But they have constructed it today, and this is what it looks like. So if you want to see how it works more or less like this. There it is. Okay. And you can see each one of those tick marks, okay, is caused by the pendulum swinging back and forth. Okay, so this was what Galileo had in mind. This is what he invented. Is this science? Or are we talking about technology here? So yeah, Galileo observed, and because observed without understanding anything of the causes, the whys, the mechanisms, he was able to build a device. We call this technology. So he developed technology based on description, but so far we have no understanding of why the pendulum goes back and forth. And yeah, this is, by the way, this is a gravitational clock. And just in case you didn't notice, let me make that specifically clear. Okay, you can see this moving back and forth. Okay, but while it moves back and forth, you see that the weight is falling. So I put it in fast motion just so you would see that. Okay, you see how it's dropping the weight that's there? That's what's driving the mechanism. Okay, if you didn't have that weight there, you would not have perpetual motion. Okay, so if you think that it's gravity moving that and that moves forever, well, no, it's got something that allows it to move. And in this case, it's that weight, which is a weight thing, not a mass thing. It's got nothing to do with mass. It's got to do with weight, meaning the force of gravity. Okay, so it's a gravitational clock, by the way. Okay, just wanted people to be aware of that. Okay, so, and by the way, Christian Huygens later on, I think it was 1665, he made the first really practical pendulum clock. Okay, and from there, again, time was very closely associated with the pendulum. They wanted to control time, and here was one of the first devices that really they were able to, or you could say the first clock, right? That in which they were able to really measure time to any measure of accuracy. Okay, it was the pendulum clock. This was the real. Before that, they had water clocks and clepsydras. The drop of water. And they replaced that with the pendulum clock, which was a little more controlled. And of course, from then on, clocks were improved over time, And by the time you get to the 19th century, you have this fellow, and he uses this pendulum to tell you that the Earth is rotating. Okay, that's Foucault. And what you see is that the sweeping of that pendulum changes angles simply because the Earth rotates. Okay, so he was able to show that without staying outside of the Earth, being inside the Earth, you could show that the Earth rotates with this little device. Okay, what did they all miss? From Foucault before and Foucault onwards, all of them. What did they all miss? This is what Galileo missed. Okay, this was the cause. We're going to put the cause of the pendulum. What causes the pendulum to behave the way it does? Okay, and there you see it. Okay, we put it on top of the Earth. Okay, Galileo there with his two little pendulums. Well, every atom of each one of those pendulums is attached to every atom on Earth. I just put the main ones because that goes to the center of the Earth, which is the center of gravity of our planet. It's a sphere. Okay, this also shows that it's got to be a sphere, otherwise the pendulum wouldn't work. And yes, if every atom of the pendulum is attached to every atom on Earth, specific and stronger as you move towards the center, well then, yes, this is the reason that there's a physical influence from the Earth on those two pendulums. Okay, so this is what they missed. What they missed is the ropes, the stuff that they could not see or touch. And clearly, you're not going to be able to discover the ropes through see or touch. You can't see or touch the ropes. Okay, here again. I say pencil, let go of it, falls to the earth. Again, repeatable. You always have to make it repeatable for it to be scientific, right? So we do it at least 2 times. That's called repeatable. Also falls to the earth. I guess I proved my point, okay? But the issue is there's nothing here and there's nothing here. Other than air, right? But I mean, air is not... it's not air that causes gravity, okay? So what is pulling, what is pushing on the pencil? What came in contact with the pencil? Okay, and the same with the pendulum. I mean, if you have the pendulum moving back and forth, I don't want to hypnotize you, but if you move this back and forth, why does it cling and move back and forth? Well, again, because every atom of that pendulum is stuck to every atom on Earth, primarily towards the center is the strongest force, right? And so, yeah, it moves and it comes back because it's trying to get to that center. And eventually, if you let it stay there for 2 hours, it'll stand there and point to the center of the Earth. See how simple it was? And the only way you're going to figure that out is if every atom of the pendulum is tied, bound to every atom on Earth. If it's not physically bound, why would it point in the direction of the center of the Earth? And why would it eventually stop at that point, right? After swinging. And then the other issue is if you don't explain it with some kind of pull, some kind of attachment, in this case, every atom being connected to every atom on Earth of the pendulum, right? What are you going to put in there? Spirits? Energy? Is that what we're going to put in there? We're going to call it the mass. What is the mass? Oh yeah, that's right. We determine mass by weighing. Okay, let's move on to some of the questions and comments people made since last time. Here they are. First one, and Paul says, and it goes with what we're saying here, right? What we've been talking about the last few minutes. Paul says, let me get this bigger here. If an object is somehow transformed into a concept because it is composed out of other objects, then the rope hypothesis is false, because the ropes are a concept because they are made out of threads. First of all, there's nothing false in science. False is and true, right, are words that belong exclusively to religion. False and true, true and false, those are opinions. Opinions belong to religion. That's what religion is, opinions, beliefs. Here we're not talking about religion. We're not talking about opinions or belief. We're not talking about true or false. We're not giving you an opinion. What we're saying is that an object is that which has shape. Now he says, well, the rope is made of two threads, therefore it's made of something that is made of two objects is a concept. Well, here we have a table. It's made out of, what, 5 pieces at least, I would say. You have 4 legs and a top, a board. So a table is not an object because it's made of 5 objects. How about a dog? It's got a head, 4 legs, a tail, a body. You have at least 6 there. And we could go on and on. I mean, it's got a heart, liver, you know. Dog is not an object because it's made of all these parts. And how about the rope? Well, the rope is made of 2 threads, he says. But no, here, let me show you a rope that is made of 1 thread. Okay, this is a single thread. We have a single thread, okay? Make sure you understand that. Let me move this out of here for a second. Okay, here you have it, okay? It's a single thread, closed looped. And then you have the rope. So a rope is made out of a single object, and a rope is a single object. Yes or no? But yeah, there's a single closed loop thread in all of space. In that sense, the rope is made of a single object. It's the same, you know, we call one the magnetic thread, the other one the electric thread, just for the sake of explaining how, you know, just to relate to the famous, the ubiquitous transverse wave, which has a magnetic field and an electric field. We use the same word. We say the electric thread, magnetic thread. There's no difference between the 2 threads. It's a single thread in the entire universe, okay? It's just coming around that region where we're connecting 2 atoms. That's all it is, okay? But the point here is that when you look at a table, you don't say, well, what is it made out of? How many parts is it made out of? You're not thinking about that. You're looking at the table and thinking it's made out of a single piece. The same as the dog. When I point to a dog, you're not saying, well, how many legs does it have? Or, oh, but it's made out of different parts. No, you point to the dog and say that whole thing is called a dog. The whole thing, the whole system is called a dog. And the same for a rope. You know, you point to this. I don't care if it ends here, you know. You point to this whole thing and say, this is a rope. This is the word we use to refer to this device, this entity, this thing. So we point and say, rope. Okay? And that's how you're supposed to present energy, for example. You should point. I don't care if it's made out of a gazillion particles. Fine. I don't care about that. I'm looking at the overall shape of this thing you call energy, or this, whatever you call it, mass, field. We're looking at the whole thing. Is it a physical object? You say yes, okay. Just point to the whole thing. Say, well, it's made out of all these particles. I don't care. We don't care about what it's made out of, okay? But if you use it like that, that's where you run into trouble, okay? For example, the ether, you know, what is the ether? Well, you can point to it and say, it's this blob. That's the ether. Okay, fine, no problem. We take it as if it's made out of a single piece. We don't care. But you say, well, see, it's made out of all these particles because they're going to vibrate. Oh, now you're not talking about the ether, the whole blob. Now you're talking about a portion, the heart, the liver of the ether. Now you're pulling a piece of the ether out of there and doing something with it. Okay, so the ether is the whole blob. You can't say, well, but I'm going to be using only this portion I'm going to call that the ether. No, that's called the subportion of ether. And then that means you're treating it as what it's made out of and not as the ether. When I use a rope, I'm saying, you know, what it does as a rope. And in the case of magnetism, I separate the ropes and I call them threads. Now I'm going to deal with the thread, but in all cases, I'm dealing with an object. And they can't do that for certain with energy, especially if they define it as the capacity. Okay, here you have another comment. Fellow says about Ayn Rand. Some call her Ayn Rand. I call her Ayn like ain't. And entity is a thing. Now, I don't know if he was parroting Ayn here or whether this is what he truly believes in or proposes, theorizes. And it doesn't matter because I'm going to address the issue. Okay, so I don't care if he believes or or it was just regurgitating ein there. Okay, entity is a thing, a solid thing. That is, only this matter state air is not an entity, and not a thing, not an entity. Fluids are not entities. And yeah, this is what Ein said. Ein. She said these things. So whether this fellow agrees with her or not, I don't know, but this is what she said. She concluded all these fluids, air, those are not things, those are not entities, the word that she was analyzing. Okay, entity is what is given in sense perception. Again, if entity is a thing, an object, something, then it has nothing at all to do with perception, meaning Ain never figured it out. She did not figure it out. She made all the errors that everybody else made. Okay, Hume, Kant, all of them made the same error. Wittgenstein, all of them made exactly the same error. They never figured out what an object is. Okay, never have we had a definition of the word object thing for the purposes of physics. And people say, well, she was doing philosophy. Well, no, the thing here is that this is not about whether you are doing philosophy or something else. What we're talking about here is that if you're going to be doing physics, okay, if you're going to be doing physics, if you're going to be doing science, then you're going to have to use definitions that are universal. You can't say, well, no, I defined it for this. You can't chop that off like that. Either you do science or you do what Mr. Rutherford says. You do stamp collecting. So maybe she was doing stamp collecting. Okay, we don't care then. But if she's going to try to rationalize something, she's crossed the line into science. She's crossed the line into physics. Now she's going to abide by the rules of physics. She can't say, well, I was doing it for philosophy. Sorry, philosophy is part of science. And if you're going to do science, we can only use one word. The word object belongs to physics, not to philosophy. It doesn't belong to this thing they call ontology or whatever they call it out there in that world. We don't care about any of that. Okay? In science, and philosophy and physics are the two branches of science. In science, an object has only one definition, and it's a synonym of entity, something, body, thing, etc. So there's only one definition, and she didn't figure that definition out. She can't say, well, I'm going to do it for philosophy, and it's got to do with perception. No, because perception has too many problems, and here are some of the problems that she has with perception and her notion of the definition of object, of thing, of entity. And here they are. Entity, thing are synonyms, first of all. So if she didn't realize that, well, we got a problem. And so she can't say that entity is a thing. No, because that's like saying entity is an entity. If they're synonyms, she can't use the word thing to define the word entity. But then air and fluids are made out of atoms. Hopefully they are things. Hopefully they are entities. Hopefully they are objects. As bad as that might sound to your ear, yes, air and any water, etc., they're all objects, physical objects, because anything made out of atoms had better be an object. Okay? Not that that's the definition of objects, but anything that is made of atoms had better be an object. Okay? Concepts are not made of atoms. And perception, well, that's for sure no-go. You know, doesn't prosper. Why? Because first you need nouns before verbs. Perception is a verb. And experiment, that's what she's doing there. By perceiving, you're saying, well, until I perceive, it's not an object, it's not a thing. And so, no, that's not the way it works, and that's why we do not accept observers in science. There are no observers. We do not care what you feel, what you sense, because that comes afterwards. Objects are pointed to, right, or determined before you do any perception. And perception requires two objects. Okay, that's the other issue. You need two objects to make one object, one entity. And then, according to her definition. And an object requires no motion. Object is a static concept. So there had better be no motion, meaning no verb, meaning no perception. Okay, perception requires motion. No object requires perception. Okay, another fellow says, I think it's same fellow, talking about same subject really here. To limit yourself to defining an object only that which has shape is Randian. I don't know where he got that, because that's not what she said. She said that and much more, meaning she did not know what an object is. Because when you mention a lot of things in your definition, it means you don't understand. If you say, well, an object is that which I can touch and see, which has shape, which has mass, which has volume, that's not the definition of object. The definition of object is chopped off at shape. All the rest of the garbage is wiped out. And if you're going to say, well, an object's this, this, and this, and that, like Ain said, then she's got a problem. It means she did not understand what an object is for the purposes of science. And philosophy is part of science. You can't say, well, I'm going to do philosophy and not science. Well, sorry, philosophy is part of science. You're not part of science. You cannot, and therefore you do not want to define the implication of the word shape in your definition. That which has shape? Okay. In your opinion, fundamental to your proposal of rational science, but if it is fundamental, try to be exhaustive and complete. Well, I think I am completely complete. That which has shape. That's the definition of the word object. And he says, well, you're not being complete because I don't know what a shape is. Okay, let's find out. Let's find out where this fellow is pissing out of the pot. Okay, here it is. In science, we do not define any word in the dictionary, especially to please the devil's advocate. Because if an object is that which has shape, why didn't you ask me what the word that means, or what the word is, or the word which, or and? I mean, you can drive me nuts asking me to define every word in the dictionary. Why did you pick on the word shape? And so, yeah, we do not define every word in the dictionary, and the only words we define are those that make or break our theory. And we need to define the word object, not the word shape. We do not have any reason to define the word shape. And here's the reason why. It's the context. The context of the word shape is we require a definition of object because we can't do physics without objects. You cannot explain a mechanism if you don't have objects. In fact, if you had no objects in the universe, there would be nothing to explain, okay? Because there would be nothing out there, nothing happening. There would be no physics. So you need objects to begin to do physics. That's the first word of physics. We have to choose a criterion. That's what this context is about. We either go with see-touch, which is the religion of mathematics, that's what they use, or with shape. Okay, and so the question here is the choice. Are we going to choose see-touch, or are we going to choose shape? Do we need to know what see-touch is to infinitesimal degrees? Do we have a perfect definition of see-touch? No, we don't. We can say, look, see-touch, the normal definitions, the normal notions of those, give us an idea whether we're going to go with see-touch on the one hand or shape on the other. Every object in the universe has shape. Not every object in the universe can be seen or touched. We're done. Aside from the fact that see, touch are verbs, shape is an adjective. Okay, shape is a property of all objects. See, touch is something that they do. You have to define nouns before you define verbs. So that's the issue. Do we need to know what shape is? Well, we don't, and so if you have trouble with that, then there's the corollary. If you don't understand the meaning of the word shape, please take Kindergarten 101 again. Okay? I mean, every little kid can teach you what shape is. So, yeah, it's all these devil's advocates, extreme devil advocates. They say, well, you need to define shape. Well, not in science. Science, we don't define shape because it's not a key word. Not at all. What we need to know is the difference between shape on the one hand and see touch on the other. Because if you do not go with shape, are you going to go back to see touch? Is that the default? Are we going to continue with see touch like we have for the last 10,000 years on the basis of, I don't know, authority, democracy, tradition? Is that what it's all about? Or are we going to say, no, we had the wrong definitions for the last 10,000 years, and we're going to challenge it. We're going to challenge it, and we're going to replace it with shape, because shape is universal, It's a static concept. It's an adjective, not a verb. Therefore, you do not have to go in there and run any test or move anything. Shape is a static concept, okay? And yes, it's in religion, it's no, or ordinary speech, it's known as a noun. In physics, it's known as an adjective. It's a property. It's a characteristic of an object, okay? And yeah, we have to destroy this notion that an object is that which we can see and touch, which is also, by the way, the definition they use for exist. If you can see or touch it, it exists. But if you can't see or touch it, it doesn't exist. So we can't see or touch the ropes, right, that cause this thing to fall to earth. And because of that, there's nothing there that doesn't exist. That's the way they reason it. Okay, so yeah, we can't keep using see and touch for both object and for exist. That's what's got to die. Okay, another fellow raises a similar issue, says, when you give a definition of something, you are giving your opinion of that thing. Oh, is that so? That is, it is subjective. Okay, then you take it for granted that your opinions are not opinions, but objective thoughts that are valid for everyone. So everybody's got to buy into it, or, you know, they're unscientific. That's what he's saying. That I'm accusing them of this. Okay? You don't go very far in having your philosophical proposals discussed. Big accusations. Well, no, see, mine are not opinions. Okay? Mine are not opinions. I'm defining the word object, for example, and I'm saying an object is that which has shape. That's a definition. You might say, well, that's your opinion. Okay? The way it works in science, and again, this is in science, okay? The way it works in science is that you either get in the ring and challenge the definition by putting another definition we can live with, okay? Or you keep your mouth shut. You accept it. So it's not that I'm giving your opinion or that I'm shoving it down your throat. The way it works is if you got a better mousetrap, you have to get inside the ring and fight for your mousetrap. Only one definition can remain standing. We don't have two champions in boxing, or in, sometimes in boxing you do, but in science, in physics, you can't have two definitions for the same word. One of them can only stand. And so if you've got a better definition, you get inside the ring, we fight. You put up your dukes, put on your gloves, and put up your dukes, we fight. And only one man remains standing. Okay, so if you got a better definition, get inside the ring and fight for your definition. Defend it. If you can't defend it because it's trashed, like the see touch is very easily trashed, then you lost. Lost, you might say, well, that's your opinion. Yeah, we can only use rational definitions in science. What is a rational definition? One that can be used consistently. Okay, and one where you don't convert a concept into an object, by the way. Okay, but anyways, you got to fight for your definition. It's not an opinion; it's a definition, and you either challenge it or keep your mouth shut. And the way you challenge it is you bring another definition, one that's better, and you allow that one to be criticized as well. Okay, so yeah, that's the way it works in science. In science, we don't vote for definitions. We don't raise our hands. We don't go on authority, and we don't go by tradition. We don't care what 99% of humanity believes, or even almost 100%. We don't care. It's whatever you can use consistently. That's a scientific definition. Paul says, telling people they live on a spinning ball is the height of disinformation. I'm still trying to understand why you think that water can curve and stick to a spinning ball. What is gravity? You know, what is interesting is all these flat earthers, they come in there and they always ask the question, how do you curve water? They always ask the question, then they never come back to receive the punishment. So they never hear the answer. And so you give them an answer and they never come back to hear. And then they go to another side and they say, oh, how do you curve water? How do you curve water? And they keep going from side to side just saying the same thing. They never come here to say, well, Bill, at least you showed me how to curve water. So yeah, I do show, what is it, like the gazillionth time that I'm showing how to curve water around a planet and why the planet is round, meaning spherical. And why gravity works? Only because it is a sphere. And the guys never come back. They never listen to the answer. They just put the questions, a hit and run. They never come back. And here it is, okay, one more time. I'm sorry to bore all those people who know the answer, okay? So here it is, okay? And you see that atom, and it's connected by ropes. I just put these few lines there to simulate the ropes. You have the atoms there, every atom on the surface of the Earth, and I'm just showing the surface of the Earth here, but every atom is connected to all others. But here I'm showing one atom connected to all these other atoms on Earth, same here, okay, one on the bottom. So they're all pointing towards the center because they're all being pulled towards the center. And that not only works for water, but also for air, which is what I'm showing with that outer layer there. All the atoms that comprise air are tied to every atom on Earth. And of course, they're going to go towards the center of gravity. That's where most of the ropes converge upon. And that's why all liquids and gases are shaped as a shell around the Earth, okay? The spherical Earth. There is no such thing as a flat Earth. Only flatheads, people with little mind, with tiny minds, talk about, evidence and say, well, what's the evidence? And even when they showed them the evidence of like a picture from outer space, they say, well, that was tricked by the astronauts, by NASA, and so on. No, the way it works is what I show you there. Gravity is a function of the number of ropes that interconnect every atom that comprises our system called the Earth, including the liquids on its surface, including the gas called air that surrounds it. So all these are covering the Earth like a shell. And why? Because every atom, why don't those atoms start flying away? And there's the answer. The answer is all atoms are physically interconnected by ropes. That's why they don't fly away. Okay? They have no place to fly away because they're tugged towards the center of our planet. Okay? So that's the answer. If you want to know how water curves, now you know. Every drop in the ocean is, in fact, not only every drop, but every atom that comprises every drop is tugged towards the center of the Earth because all atoms are physically interconnected. Physically, you have this rope connecting two atoms. That's what we have. Okay, two atoms bound by a rope. So this one can't fly away. Okay, got it? You think so? Good. Okay, another issue. Again, it's got to do with all this energy stuff and things like that, and objects and things. And this fellow says, short question, data as such may be a concept, but the ones and zeros on a hard drive do have a physical representation. I don't know what a physical representation is. Either it's a physical or it's a representation. It can't be a physical representation. So you got to choose. Are we talking about zeros and ones being standalone physical objects, or are they representations, meaning some kind of abstract concept? And as again, these people go around in circles and bite their own butts, okay? We transfer this information. So he puts quotes around transferring information. Why did he put quotes? I mean, in physics, it's literal. This is transfer. You want to transfer a box like this one from your right hand to your left hand, you go, that's called transfer. I transferred the box, the cube. That's the way it works. Now, can you do that with a 0 and 1? Well, I try to grab the 0 and I can't grab it because there's nothing there. Even the 1, it's a concept. I can't grab that. So how do you transfer a 0 or a 1? How do you transfer information? I mean, how do I hold the information in my hand? I want to hold it so that I can transfer it, literally, physically. And I can't do that. And these people don't understand that. Why? Because they don't define their terms. They're using words of ordinary speech. That's why they have to put quotations. Well, you know what I mean. I'm transferring it. Oh, you're transferring it. Yeah, I'm transferring information. Well, why did you put it in quotes? Well, because he knows it's not an object and he's not transferring it. That's why. We're talking about physics here, guys. Physics, it's literal. This is transfer. Left to right. That's called transfer. Okay? If not, how does your YouTube video work? Well, it works through electricity, not through zeros and ones. Okay, but someday when you get to high school, you'll figure it out. They'll teach you this. Yeah, the way computers work is it's all electricities in there. It's atoms. In case of the rope model, we say that they're all bound to each other. They're all merged, all these electron shells, and they spin in situ. And that's electricity. So yeah, that's how your computer works, because it has all these atoms which are merged to each other in long chains, and they spin in situ. That's the physical mechanism of what makes your computer run. It doesn't run with zeros and ones, whatever those are. I mean, I've never seen a physical standalone object called a 0 or a 1 that could push or pull anything inside a computer. Okay? Yeah, but maybe you can show me one day how a 0 pushes something. Okay, and so here we have fellow says ideas are they infinite? Okay, because I say that ideas are finite. Okay, you don't have in other words, if you have a bag of ideas and it's like a bag of marbles, you pull the last one out and there's no more in there. I'm saying the ideas are not infinite in that sense. It's not a bottomless pit. Okay, a black hole. You always pull ideas out of there. I'm saying no, you don't. Especially ideas regarding manufacturing things. Those ideas are probably more limited than abstract ideas like relating to programming or things that you can do out there, or concepts. Those are not infinite in the sense that you can come up eternally with more and more ideas. I don't think you can. I think those are limited as well. But it's his reasoning that's wrong. That's what I'm going to criticize here. He says, do we have an unlimited number of ideas? Since the universe is finite, okay, listen to this, the ideas will consequently be finite. Now he's mixing physics with abstractions. He's saying that because I can think or create again with quotations, create ideas, invent ideas, develop ideas, that's not the same thing as creating something physical. I discussed that the other day, right? But if the universe is finite or infinite, it has nothing to do with the ideas that come out of the brains of people. Okay, people can come up with ideas, create ideas, invent ideas, irrespective of if they're in a prison cell. You know, you're in there, you're in this box, you know. They say, oh, my ideas are limited because the room is limited. My ideas cannot go beyond the room. Well, I discovered in prison that, yeah, the ideas can go beyond the room. Believe me, I proved that. So just because the room in which I'm in, you know, is small doesn't mean my ideas cannot go beyond that, okay? So it's his reasoning that's wrong, okay? So my dear God, with some of these people. Anyways, with that, I'll see you on Wednesday. I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.